it's not a surprise to me that you see a state like Arizona where Donald Trump is really underperforming, even in the last week or so, really underperforming where Republicans have been in the past, because his rhetoric is so sharply divided, and he's really giving Latinos no pathway for support of him. And so my expectation is that this will be a very hard-fought election, although my hope is that the coalition that actually elected President Obama twice will be a strong coalition to defeat the kind of hyper-racialized language and policies of the Republican nominee. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I always look forward to these discussions so that we can learn more about what you're thinking and issues that should inform the work we do. So thank you for that, and I'm happy to take questions and have a discussion. Susanna?
Thank you so much, Neera. It's great, I mean, the presentation you gave us. Before I open the floor for questions, I would like to ask everybody to raise your hand so we can see who wants to make the questions. And Jorge is going to tell me who's with the question. But to begin with, I would like to consider what you say, that this process is a crazy process and it's definitely going to be a hard election. And if we make a comparison between, let's say, the last election in 12, we had that 71% of the Latino vote was for the Democrats, and just 27% was for the Republicans. And currently, we're expecting, I mean, at that moment and also now, we're expecting that at least 50% currently is Democrats, 10% Republicans, and if I'm right, there are like 35% that they don't know yet what they are doing. And even if they are against and they don't like Trump, as you mentioned, I mean, 73% of those Latinos who are Republicans, they don't like Trump. There's just something there that it's worrying Mexicans. It's worrying that those 35% that they don't know yet if they are voting for the Democrats or for the Republicans, they will go for Hillary, or probably the worst is that they will not vote. So what can we do with that? No, I mean, it's like the number of voters that they will decide not to vote, and particularly those Republicans, they will not help either the democratic process. So I don't know if you have some ideas on these issues of those who are not who decide not to vote because they don't like either Hillary or either Trump.
Yeah, so I think what's really important to remember is that we, that many political junkies are super engaged in the primary process and super, focused on Donald Trump's last tweet or Hillary Clinton's last appearance on Meet the Press. But the vast majority of Americans, not just Latinos, but the vast majority of Americans don't engage in primaries. So in the entire primary process, you have about 35, 40 million people voting. We should have 120 million, 130 million people voting in the actual election. So a lot of people are not so intently focused on what's happening. Having said that, I have not seen, as I said earlier, I have not seen a political candidate in my lifetime so openly attack particular groups. And, Donald Trump entered his election process. He announced his candidacy, attacking Mexicans with horrible rhetoric of rapists and other things, and has really used the kind of deep primary within the Iowa and states that were pretty much there were no Latino voters. His rhetoric was pretty intensely negative. Now, he will try to say that Latinos support him and the Latinos love him and that kind of rhetoric. But I do think it is upon the Democratic Party and progressive forces to remind voters of where he has stood on these issues. But he can't really be seen as a strong leader and just flip 100% on, things he said about the wall. And so I think that this election will be important for people to remind folks, it'll be up to Hillary Clinton and others to remind folks not only of the things Trump has said, but the commitments she has made and the big difference between them. Now, we live in a time that people are relatively cynical. I know a lot of Latino voters are disappointed that the progress that has been made is not what we'd all hoped for. Progress has been made, but we didn't pass comprehensive immigration reform. Having said that, Donald Trump's rhetoric is so divisive that he's creating some fear in a lot of communities. And I think one thing to be optimistic about is that we are seeing levels of voter registration that we have not seen, that usually happens in the late summer and in the fall. We're seeing levels of voter registration that match that in important states like, as I said, Nevada and California. Now, we have to see that. We have seen increases in Florida, but there's a lot of work to do there. My expectation is that Hillary will do better in states that have strong Latino populations than President Obama does. But it will be up to all of us to show that. And I don't think we should think about levels of voter apathy in May as indicative of voter rates in November, because just 4 years ago at this point, Mitt Romney was in the national polls was outpolling President Obama. He was up 3, 4, or 5 points across the board. Some had him even higher. And so I think that means we have a lot of work to do, but it's work that can be done and has been done before.
Thank you so much, Neera. Well, now we have one first question from Professor Jessica de Alba from the Universidad Anáhuac. Welcome, Jessica. Can you listen to her, Neera?
I can't hear her. So if you can hear her, maybe you could tell me what you think.
¿Tienes la pregunta?
No, nada más levanto la mano. Doctora Jessica de Alba, ¿nos puede escuchar?
Well, while we're connected with her, I would like to, definitely you're right. The swing states are where we do have to do the most important work, definitely. But I have another worry and preoccupation, which is that if the Republicans now they decide that they lost and they will not have the presidency, my feeling is that they are much more focused on the Congress, and that they don't want to lose what they had in 2012 and the majority that they want to keep in order to reduce the level of decision for Hillary Clinton. You think that's right, that they are totally focused on the Congress and not necessarily in the presidency?
Yeah, I don't think that. I think what's going to happen is where we are right now in the election process is Hillary is still in a primary. It's not a primary, the numbers are that she's going to win the nomination, but Senator Sanders supporters are not supporting her at the levels that you would expect if she had already won the nomination. She has a deep challenge there, which is not unlike where President Obama was 8 years ago. In fact, she's doing a little bit better than President Obama was 8 years ago with Senator Sanders supporters, but she still has a deep chasm there. The Republican nominee has really united. Donald Trump has united the field. There are holdouts. He has a particular problem with millennial women under 35 who are Republican or conservative. They have some resistance to him. He has some deep pockets of conservatives who are resistant to him. That is why he made his Supreme Court pick last week. He's trying to rally conservatives to his side. My expectation is that he will get a lot of, there will be Republican holdouts, but he will unify most of the party. My hope is that after this primary process, Hillary will also unite most of the party. And I think that she has a better chance of doing that than we had even 8 years ago, because 8 years ago, we didn't have a president. In 2008, you didn't have a force like President Obama. My expectation is President Obama will be a very, very strong force to unite the party, as will Elizabeth Warren and other Democrats. And so I do think Hillary will have to talk about issues where she is united with Senator Sanders supporters, but I expect her numbers to move up when Senator Sanders supporters, who are now saying they're not naming anyone in support of the presidency, I expect the vast majority of them, vast majority of them will support Hillary in the end. That will take some work, but I think that is true. But at the end of the day, I think Republicans have not been in power for 8 years. They will spend, most of them, not all of them, will spend a lot of resources on the presidential race. For people thinking they're all going to shift their resources to the Senate, large forces like the people Trump has attacked, maybe like the Koch brothers, who he has specifically attacked in the past, they may not spend as much money on the House and Senate. But I think progressives are kidding themselves if they think that somehow, the Republicans are going to concede the presidential race, having not had the presidency for the last 8 years. That is not my view. That is not the arguments I'm making internally to the Hillary Clinton campaign. I think that they have to essentially, the map is going to be similar. We have some potential to actually increase support amongst Latinos versus past years. If you're facing Donald Trump versus Mitt Romney and you can't get an even stronger majority of Latinos to vote against Donald Trump than Mitt Romney, then I think there's something fundamentally wrong in the country. So my expectation is that we'll be able to, I don't think you'll see a kind of configuration that is very different. And we do hear reports in the New York Times that Republican donors are holding back from Donald Trump. But if Republican donors actually determined who the Republican nominee would be, it would not be Donald Trump, since he had the most money spent against him by Republican big donors of any person running, and he is the nominee.
Let's cross the fingers and hopefully you are more than right. I don't know, Jessica, are you there? Or Jessica, are you there? Can you bring your question, please? Vela leyendo.
Trump is still not the nominee.
¿Y Frania está en línea? Frania, can you make us the question open, please? Frania Duarte also has another question.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to ask a question regarding the votes. I understand that in 2008 and 2012, it was very important for Obama's victory, the Latino vote. However, I was reviewing some statistics and figures from the Pew Research Center saying that there are low voting levels because not all Latinos are eligible for voting, and also because not all Latinos go to vote the day of the presidential election. For example, in 2008, 9.7 million of Latinos out of 19.5 voted. So in this election, are Latinos intend to vote more like in past elections? I don't know if candidates are campaigning more towards and focusing in this group, so they could go to vote more a more amount of Latinos go to the polls that day, because it's a very important number. Like I don't know, it's almost like half of Latinos are not voting, so that's kind of concerning. I mean, they won't give the absolute victory to the candidate, but it's a very important number that they can make a difference.
Yeah, that's a great question. And as I referenced earlier, Latino rates of participation in the presidential cycle still lag other groups. So African American rates have actually exceeded whites, which is, I believe, around 2/3 of voters. So I should say, in the United States, we have a broad challenge, which is lots of people who can participate don't participate. So the reference point usually is around 2/3 of voters who, actually participate in the election process. So you are absolutely right that Latino rates of participation have lagged other groups. Having said that, even with the lagging of other groups in the past, Latinos have been decisive voters in a number of critical states. States we often think of, like Florida and Nevada, but other states and Colorado that we don't often think about, like Virginia, like North Carolina. These are states that have a growing Latino vote, a growing population. They are not as high as a state like Texas or Florida, but do form a critical voting bloc when put in combination with African Americans, Asians. Virginia is a great example. Latinos are a growing group, Asians are a growing group. Neither one of them currently match on their own African Americans, but they're approaching African Americans in that state, and with progressive whites can form a strong majority of voters. And they are one of the reasons why Democrats have captured both the state and presidential elections as well as gubernatorial races. So having said that, there's nothing to rest on. You have a candidate who is pretty racially toxic as the Republican nominee. That is incumbent upon all of us to make clear to Latinos the stakes in this election. It's not just whether we'll go forward or backward. It's not only whether we'll go forward on comprehensive immigration reform. It's fundamentally like whether we'll go backwards on all of these issues. And whether, you'll have a president of the United States who will pick on Latinos on a regular basis. That would be a terrible thing to happen. I hope that Donald Trump will actually mean that Latino voter participation will actually match other groups, because the level of just overt hostility and racism will actually disturb people. But even if Latinos vote at the same level that they've voted in the past election cycle, their numbers will still be a larger percentage because there are more and more Latinos are a faster growing group within the country. So when we say we expect people of color to be 30% of the election of people voting in 2016, and they were in 2012, they were 28%. A lot of that growth is fueled by Latino voters, and the estimates are voting at the same level of participation that they've voted before. So participation rate cannot go up, and we'll still have a lot more Latino voters because a lot more Latinos are becoming voters even at their lower rates because there are just more people in the country. And so that is a very, very long way of saying we should still make clear to every Latino in America, and I hope people hearing our voice will work on that over the next several months. I think this is an important, this is not an election to have any levels of apathy. I think people have to recognize that they have a role to play in participation. But the low levels are not ones that just mean doom for us going forward. And I hope we'll actually increase those rates, but even if we don't, I hope that the lopsided vote will be a significant contributor to the defeat of Donald Trump.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neera. Yes, as you said, I remember in the 2008 election, I went to Virginia as an observer, and it was amazing that there were some counties that they were Republicans since the 60s. And from there until the 2008, they always voted for the Republicans. And with Obama, the first election, they voted for Obama as part of the Democratic vote. So it was very important. I mean, to Obama's administration, and also even the Bush administration, the Latino vote was very, very important for the definition of the presidential election. Definitely, you're right, and that number is increasing. And if we see the expectations for the year 2050, the number of Latinos is going to be totally different from the one we have now. I have the question, Neera, that Jessica Galva couldn't make it because there's a technical problem with her computer, but she sent us the question here. She says, Trump is still not the nominee, first of all, and second, we are confusing the topic of migration and the Hispanic vote. Statistics have shown that even if there are more Hispanic eligible to vote, not all of them do. About 40% do this, and this election may not be different from those in the past. Hispanic vote in 2 states that are not very competitive in presidential elections, California and Texas, as you mentioned. I don't know if you got it.
Yeah, so, no, I got that. I think, I think this is a similar question to the previous one, which is expressing a deep concern about the levels of participation. So, it's the case that it approaches around 50% of eligible Latino voters are voting. That is a low number. So that is something we should all be anxious about. Having said that, every month, 80,000 new Latino voters turn 18 across the country. So that's 80,000 people every month. If 50% of them actually vote, that's 40,000 every month. That is what is driving the increase in people of color potentially voting in 2016. So people are, what I often say about people in the Democratic Party is that they really only have 2 emotions: utter confidence or complete panic. Okay, and this election cycle will see both day to day. And my view of this is that if you see the rhetoric of this campaign and even actions that are being taken already, you are seeing very high levels of voter registration, much higher, much earlier than we've seen in previous cycles. So that says that there are Latinos who are reacting negatively to this rhetoric. I know of certain efforts to register Asian voters, which has been historically a bit difficult. Those levels are much higher than they've been in previous cycles. People are seeing the rhetoric of this election cycle and reacting negatively. So, I remind people who panic about Donald Trump that Barack Obama did win an election with a coalition. Hillary does have to energize that coalition. She can't just rely on that coalition. She does have to energize that coalition and make clear to them that the stakes are very high. However, Donald Trump, I will just note, the day after he clinched his nomination, took a picture of himself eating a taco salad and saying Latinos love him. Jeb Bush, not a Democrat, Jeb Bush's response to that was like saying eating watermelon and saying to African Americans that they love him. He's still like, if we think he's not going to be have racialized rhetoric in this race, we are wrong. He relies on a deep base of white voters who are feeling like the diversity of the country is hurting them. That is one of the reasons why I don't expect him to really ameliorate his rhetoric. He will have advisors who say he doesn't really mean it, etc. He'll try to have it both ways, but I think it's up to Democrats, it's up to progressive forces to remind people this is how he won his race, this is how he will be as president. And I expect that Latinos who are in this moment feeling, not super engaged, will engage throughout this process. That relies on another, Hillary's campaign and other forces to remind them that it is a much easier case to make that who the next president is will really affect your life today than it was even in 2012 when Latinos broke 71% in favor of President Obama.
Thank you, Neera. Yes, you're right. I mean, that increasing number of the registration, we can see day by day, and we know that, for instance, in overall, from the white population, 35% votes normally Democratic, and around 56% is Republican, and in the case of the Latinos, it's exactly the opposite. I mean, it's like 57% at least it's Democratic, and 30% around 30% is a Republican. So we will still see moving these votes, hopefully much more to the Democratic Party. We have another question here from Israel, who's part of the Connexi here. He's on the director of the council. Israel, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Chacon. My question is, last week, Robert Kagan from the Brookings Institution wrote an article on the Washington Post affirming that Trump's campaign is bringing fascism to America because its success is based on attacking a wide range of others, whether they are Hispanics or women, Chinese, etc., more than maintaining a coherent ideology. Would you agree with Mr. Kagan, or would you say that he's gone too far in his argument?
Oh, no, I would agree. I would agree. There was a piece. There's Robert Kagan's piece last week. There's Adam Gopnik wrote a piece in the New Yorker over the weekend about how fascism starts. It's not just, obviously attacking racial groups, racial minorities, or racial or ethnic minorities in order to gain power is the classic version of fascism, which Donald Trump has espoused. But Donald Trump also espoused a series of policies to, essentially use the powers of the state to attack his opponents. And just last week, he attacked the Washington Post, arguing that essentially their owner, who owns Amazon, is out to get him, and basically threatened to use the IRS against Amazon to make them pay more taxes because they're opposing Donald Trump. This is, I think of the kind of indictment of Donald Trump is that this kind of rhetoric was acceptable in a Republican Party that has been telling us for years that they actually don't want a strong government. If there's anything that Donald Trump has shown is that the Republican Party is not libertarian. They are prone to support a kind of strong leader who has very proto-fascist tendencies. So, as I said when I started this webinar, we hear from leaders around the country. We have around the world. We have leaders from Europe, from Asia, who come through to the Center for American Progress, and everyone worries about the potential of a Trump presidency. And I think those are legitimate worries because the United States is a strong country, and if the government were to fall into the hands of someone like Trump, I would say personally, I'm worried about that. So, I think that puts a lot of pressure on the Democrats, but also I think a lot of people of goodwill there are still Republicans who are arguing they will not ever support Donald Trump. I think it's unfortunate that they don't speak for more voters, but it is the case that he will get, I think, most of the party behind him. I do think independents, that over the long term and over the course of this race, my expectation is that Hillary will actually, she's not doing well amongst independents right now because she's still in a primary, but my expectation is she will do better with independents, and she will do better with independent women than Mitt Romney did, or President Obama did against Donald Trump. White women actually voted for Mitt Romney over President Obama. My expectation is that Hillary will actually win white women in a race against Donald Trump. He is doing better with white men than Romney did, although not precipitously better, just a point or two. So my hope is that when we have two candidates who have their party's nomination in hand, and President Obama, who is polling better than he has in 3 years, just in time for this election, that you'll see the race shift again. But again, nobody. I, as a person who actually thought Donald Trump was going to be the nominee of his party for several months, no one should underestimate him. I just don't think we should also overestimate him. He has won a majority of a minority. This election, we'll see if he wins a majority of a majority, but he has a lot of challenges. Hillary has an easier path to win. She has negatives, and she has negatives she has to deal with, but her negatives are easier to erase because a lot of her negatives are being driven by primary voters right now, and depending on how the party unites can really affect that.
Thank you so much, Neera. I have another question here from Claudia Calvin, and I don't know if someone else from the public wants also to raise their hand. Claudia, please.
Thank you so much, Neera. It has been really cool to listen to your analysis and share this wider scope of what's going on. I have a twofold question, and one is related with just what you expressed, but seen from another perspective, which is the participation of Latina women. Do you think there's any differentiation in the way in which Latina women are participating in politics and might or might not impact the outcome of the electoral process? And the other side of the question would be, do you think at this time and at this moment, the participation of Mexican entrepreneurs, let's say, I don't know the word would be lobbying, but at least promoting that Latinos vote could make a change? I'm thinking, for example, associations as the AEM, the Asociación de Empresarios Mexicanos, that grew up in Texas and that's widespreading itself throughout different states, and that realize that part of their job should be not only promoting business, but also guaranteeing or making Latinos in their states, and specifically Mexican Americans, have a more active participation in political terms.
Yeah, so I welcome both of those questions. Women tend to vote at a slightly higher rate than men. That's true for most groups. I believe Latina women vote at a higher rate than men. I think one thing we've seen in the primary process is that women of color, Latinas, African American women, are voting disproportionately for Hillary Clinton, maybe based on a variety. My sense of that is that they have a long history with Hillary, and also they see a lot of the abuse Hillary has taken in the primary and over the years and have some identification with that. So I think Latinas are going to be a huge part of any coalition that the Democrats put together. in terms of what organizations can do, I actually often have this conversation with folks about the diaspora of different groups. And my strong view, and I would say my particularly strong view in this election cycle, is that if you want to gain a stronger seat at the table in governing and the decisions the country makes, the first, second, and third step is to vote. It's to vote at high levels. It's to vote at high levels that are disproportionate. A lot of people talk about successful communities within the United States. A lot of groups that have strong diasporas focus on Jewish Americans and the strength of their vote in the political process, or the strength of their voice in the political process. Ultimately, that is driven by the fact that Jewish Americans vote at a very high level. They vote at one of the highest levels of any group. It's over 70, 75%. So it's really important that if people want to have a seat at the table, if they want to determine the policies of the country, that if Mexican Americans want to determine the policies of the country, as every other group has done, they need to vote and vote at high levels. And so, and I see a particular convergence between this election cycle in which Mexico has been a whipping boy for one of the presidential candidates for Mexican American groups to say that is an important reason for us all to vote. And I can say that other communities do that. When there's rhetoric that seems anti-India or anti-China, particularly anti-India, some of the rhetoric around outsourcing has becomes racialized, seems like it's anti-Indian. You know, communities that represent Indian Americans say, you know, we need to vote at higher levels to stop this kind of rhetoric. And so I think that is an important point. And I understand that there will be stronger efforts, and I think it's really important for Mexican-American leaders to make this point, Mexican-American business leaders, Mexican-American NGOs, organizations within the United States to argue that this kind of, you know, what needs to happen in politics is this rhetoric must be seen as failing. Otherwise, it will only grow. And I think that Donald Trump president's nomination process, you know, everyone in the beginning of that process said, oh, no one's going to adopt his rhetoric. Then every Republican in the primary adopted his immigration rhetoric and his rhetoric to target, you know, to say these kind of outrageous things. They all became more outrageous because of him. So I think the lesson there is that we need to ensure that people are voting, that it's in their interest to vote, and that a high level of participation will mean that people will think twice about this rhetoric. People who are, you know, political leaders who are focusing anti-immigration rhetoric, anti-Mexican rhetoric, anti-Latino rhetoric, see that lower voting rate as an opportunity. Driving that rate up will only mean that you'll see less of this rhetoric. It's like a simple math equation. So I'm hopeful that we'll see that.
Neera.
I finally learned that emails are 49.6.
Thank you so much, Neera. I have a last question. We know that you're very busy and you have to go, but I would like to ask you something different. Let's put a scenario. Let's think about this scenario which is not a certain one, which Hillary wins the presidential election, and let's say that the majority in the Congress, and particularly the Senate, is Republican. But much more important than that, if Hillary wins, what Trump has said until now has broken in many ways the American society. And what I see as a matter of hate and discrimination, and that feeling against the Mexicans, even if they are legal or illegal, the new president will have to deal with that agenda, because I mean we see some actions of hate now against Mexicans who are not illegal Mexicans, who are Mexicans who are studying graduate programs, in the States or who are already working, and they have a lot of actions from white people or Afro-American people against them just because they speak Spanish or they are Mexicans or they are Latinos, that the new president will have to deal with that in order to try to not to have such a broken society. What do you think about this?
Yeah, so one thing, having worked for Hillary for many years, I worked for when she was First Lady, worked for her when she was Senate candidate, Senator, presidential candidate. There is the core principle for her and everything she has done is that the country is stronger when we have everyone who feels part of it. And I actually think that a race against Donald Trump that is built on racial hostility is one she's well matched for, because everything she's ever done is to ensure that if you're a Latina child, if you're an African American child, if you're an Asian kid, you have the same shot as anyone else. And I think that she will be well versed and well equipped to make that case, because I think she came up through the 60s and 70s when women were often discriminated against. She has actually felt discrimination herself because of her gender. So I think that this will be a race that she can win because of and can articulate how we are actually stronger as a country when we are together and not pitted against each other. But most importantly, I think she recognizes that we will have to rebuild as a country, and that we actually have to figure out a way to have a broad set of policies that bring everyone in. It is, I think, a tragic indictment, frankly, that Donald Trump has become the nominee of Republicans. Obviously, there's a lot of distress in the country. We have to figure out a way to rebuild. My hope is that if he is defeated and defeated strongly, Republicans will see an incentive to come together after that. I have to say, as I started, I'll end with a kind of apology that this has happened in the country, but it is an argument as to why we, have a lot of work to do over the last 6 months. But I also think that Mexican-American voices will be critical to what happens in the election. And with that, thank you all very much. I love doing this, and I love the work we do together. So I hope it's just the beginning of a lot more partnership.
Thank you so much, Neera. It was our first session like this. I think it's great. I would like to thank everybody for participating with us today. And now I would like to give the floor to Claudia just to say a few words.
Neera, thank you so much. Really, it's exciting to see what we can do together, and to see that we can give not our first, but our second and third steps on doing things together. Really, thank you so much. It's been an honor, and thank you so much for every single one of the participants in the session. We'll be discussing the U.S. electoral process in the next month, and I hope that we can catch up with you again to see what happens after the conventions and how does the electoral process evolve. Thank you so much.